Yeah. So I'd like to start with the background. So I'm a PhD student. I'm currently doing a research on how to teach better business process modeling. And I'd like to give you a topic about what is modeling. Maybe you're already familiar with the modeling, you just don't know it. What is modeling? What is the theory? I'll try to bring some examples how that could be relevant to your, let's say, practical life, maybe how you actually apply it in your daily life. So the purpose of this presentation is not to teach you how to use modeling. It's more about like how to give you maybe an interest in the topic. So maybe like in the future, if you're interested, I'll give you some sources. You can follow like studying this subject. But really it's about explaining you that these things exist, and maybe you become interested in this, and maybe you apply it somehow somewhere, most likely. I have background in bachelor's of administration and then management of information systems. So it's really on the cusp between business and IT. So it's really like aligning the two. So I really like this subject because like, for me, I'm a generalist. I like different topics. I like different subjects, philosophy, history, engineering, programming. So like this is really like very interesting field. And so I've published on this topic already for some time now. So yeah. And the lecture will be about two parts. So the first one is what is modeling, and how is modeling important for you and for practical real life. And then I will give you some tools. Take note that you don't have to like really understand it to the full. You just have to understand like the overall idea of what is modeling. Don't try to like really understand the technicalities. Understand the broader context. Yeah. So I'll start with mammoths. So do you know like what mammoths are? Like this thing, which people killed some time ago. So that's actually when the conceptual modeling actually started. So like what happened? So according to H. Proper, the first ever process model occurred when people first hunted, and then they modeled it in the cave drawings. Now for them it was a magical ritual. So for them they were kind of fascinated in a way that you have this goal of eating, you know, like in the wilds you have like this spear, and you have a group of people, and you have some tactics to follow, and then if you actually represent it, you can actually model it, and then you can actually understand the domain of it. Yeah, and then you actually can control the process. So for them it was magical ritual. Nowadays, we can actually use this tool in a more systematic way. And actually the effect of this is that once you order a pizza, it's actually the same process. So instead of hunting mammoths, you actually go order a pizza, and you actually can draw the same sort of process with the same consequences. You know, so like if you really use this tool of modeling, depending on the context, etc., obviously depending on the different languages, but the overall gist of it is the following. So you have a certain thing occurring in the reality, you model it, you transfer it into a scheme, then you understand the scheme, and you transfer the scheme back to the reality, and so you get the results that you really want. So like in the case of business, you can make more money. In the case of ordering pizza, you can do it more efficiently, more pizza, etc., etc. So the process is actually, well, it's quite old. So the modeling is like starting from the Stone Age. You know, like so it's it has a long history, and there's different types of models that you maybe have noticed, but you haven't actually thought about in this way. But for instance, if you consider heraldry, it's also a conceptual model, in the sense that you have a certain symbol. A symbol denotes something. So for instance, if you, in Zaragoza, you have a lion. Now a lion is I haven't actually explored this. Maybe someone knows like what the lion means in the heroic dream. But it's actually a symbol which denotes a certain quality, like a courage, like perseverance, etc., etc., strength. So that's a conceptual model. And that's actually an old and ancient process. And so nowadays, it transformed into model-based governance, modeling workshops. Now, model-based governance, for instance, there's a slide of statistics, and it's also like a conceptual model. So with the same, purpose of really understanding the financials of the company and then controlling them in order to influence it. So there are other real-life types of models that you use. For instance, football games. Now, if you are really passionate about football, you know, like about tactics, you know about discussions of tactics. Now, that's also a conceptual model because you have a certain symbol, like denoting a player, the current position and the desired position, and then you have a relationship between the two by connecting them. So that's a conceptual model already. So you have a certain reality, and you want to control it in such a way that you achieve a desired outcome, which is winning the game. So that's a conceptual model. Now you also have software user interfaces. Now, if you think about like a laptop, when you say the laptop, like sleep regime for the laptop. Now the laptop is not really going for sleep. It's more like a symbol denoting the what's happening for the underlying process. So that's another type of conception. And also you have geographical maps, because as you know it's actually impossible to calculate exactly the surface of an area you're measuring. Because like the way you, let's say, if you measure the borderlines in 1 meter, the surface is going to be like 1 meter. If you make it like 1 centimeter, it could double the surface. So that's really like interesting how you you couldn't that's a sort of paradox, but this paradox is related in a way to conceptual models. Because like these maps, they don't really exist. They are only a representation of a certain aspect of reality. Yeah, and the purpose, now it's quite technical, but like in a way the overall message is in a way that you have different types of modeling languages for different aspects of reality, football games, business processes, information systems. So that's like it's like real languages, like you can use like English. In English you have, for instance, 20 types of words to describe profit. Profit, income, revenue. Now I'm Russian, and in Russian there's only like 1 or 2 words. Now imagine if you have 20 types of describing the profit, who's gonna make more money? English. So that's how you English it runs the economy, for instance. Okay, that's not scientific fact, but like the idea. So the purpose of why do you model? It's really like dependent on the context, and for that you have different types of modeling languages to model it. And so the modeling, it follows in the cycle in a way that's used. So you have formal descriptions. So math is the most formal description because in there you have 1 + 1 = 2, always. But then you also have natural modeling, which is in a way like you describe, you discuss some concepts. They are not really defined. But like you kind of understand like what they mean. But like informal modeling, you really have a certain specification. So like this symbol means exactly that. So that's important for different purposes. So like if you follow more like natural style, it's for emergence of new concepts, of new ideas how to perceive reality. Now for formal modeling, it's important for automation, for computers, because you need to give this model to the computer. And the computer is going to execute what you have planned for it. But for that to happen, first you need natural modeling to discuss it, formalize, then maybe you observe the formalization, you have new ideas, and that's a sort of cycle. And it also depends on the goal. So like if you are really preparing a school assignment, like it's nobody like not nobody, but like most people don't care in the end. But like if you really sort of think about multi-billion companies, obviously for them, the more exact the modeling is, the more it is important. So like it's really also about like why is it important for everyone? Well, because the skills at modeling are highly transferable. As I have shown to you, like it's applied in football, it's applied in business processes, it's applied in different contexts. So I mean, like if you kind of understand the principles of modeling, if you can kind of like have at least of this perspective, it can really help you transfer this knowledge to other areas. So for instance, for language learning, it's the same more or less principles. And obviously it helps to develop a more systematic and process-oriented mentality. So how do you approach a certain problem? It's really dependent on this skill of conceptualizing the reality, of relating the things, how this, let's say, how this, I don't know, like a certain tactic, how has it worked in the past, for instance. So like, did it really work or did it not? Like, you can have easier time understanding if you perceive from a more systematic approach. Now, it obviously falls for more systematic communication, because if you systematically understand the things, so like you can easier communicate them. And the communication skills and the value of it is obvious, because if you know how to communicate, you can better understand things, you can better sell things, you can better plan things. So it's obviously like a very interesting and nice skill in life in general. And obviously a tool in the managerial tool set, many people, they, let's say, the experts, they often use certain skills, such as BPMN is a common language. So if you know BPMN, and then another manager comes to you, you already have a certain tool set. And the more tools you have, the more advantages you have, and the more options you have for your work in general. Now, I think, well, here are all the modeling elements. I have a question for you. Who knows what means ontology? Has anyone heard about ontology before? Has anyone studied philosophy?
In high school, do you have study
No.
philosophy?
No.
Do you understand the term ontology?
No.
If not, explain it.
Yeah, okay, so ontology is basically the study of reality. So the study of existing things. So what is the nature? I think that's a very interesting question in a way. So if you have a table, right? So you have a table, so like you have a surface, like this is a table now, right? What happens if you return the table upside down? So like this one is on the platform. Who says it's still a table? Who says it's not a table anymore? And who says it could be either? You see, so like that's not easy to explain, because like the way you understand things and the way you name things, it's really changing the perspective. In my opinion, it's kind of a table, but like at the same time it loses the functionality of the table, because the table, it has to be a surface and it has to be elevated above the ground. Now those things are studied by ontology, and that's, by the way, how science emerged. That's coming from this chain from Greek philosophy, coming up all the way now. So the same principles apply in general science. And so there you have different things that can make ontology, which is level of abstraction, the way how you feel. Like, is it a table, or is it a furniture, or is it an element of decor? You see, you have different levels of abstracting away from the specific table. Entity, nouns, table, water, etc. Relationship, so the table stands on the floor. Attributes, so the table has a certain height, weight, etc., etc. And then you have events, so you can do something with the table, so you can take it, you can rotate it, etc. So you can all model all these things And the implications then are a bit philosophical. So like everything in life, including business, but also football tactics, whatever. Everything could be broken into these essential elements. So like in the language, everything that has a word, and once you know this word, you can understand it, and then you can model it, and then you can control actually the thing about which you have this word. So in a way, if you know like that the table can stop becoming a table once you rotate it, that's at the level of abstraction. So that's it takes some time, maybe some skill to get to this, let's say, level of understanding why it's important. But over time, you kind of understand that, yeah, indeed. So if you have this modeling tool, these models, and then you operate with these models, you can actually influence what is being modeled. And that's the premise in the process modeling. So once you have a certain business process, you know the output of this business process, then you can simulate this business process, and then you can decide which one is going to be more value to it, more profits. Similar principles. Yeah, that's the premise. So you can describe reality using these words or concepts, and thus you can control, which means plan, communicate, analyze, simulate, etc. And be described or modeled reality, similarly with the mammoths. And then the second part, I think it's going to be a more shorter one, but I will just present you different tools and how they actually apply to business context. So you have medium level and high level of organization. You have different types of tools. So modeling is usually done at the beginning because usually that's where you have the more possibilities to plan for the future. So in the way how you actually model now, and so what kind of effect you expect in the future, and this difference is kind of like what you expect to see in the beginning of business modeling. So GTMN 2.0, it's used to business processes for technical and business users. It's quite popular, and the way it's quite easy. So if you spend like 3-5 hours doing it, it's quite a tool for your future, because quite likely you can expect someone somehow coming to you and asking, okay, like, what do you do in business? And then he asks you, okay, like, is this model correct? So this model, and then like you can communicate. So that's the difference between natural and formal modeling for the purposes of understanding this process and to improving its efficiency, its revenues, etc., etc. So BQMN has more than 100 symbols. So all the languages, they differ in terms of complexity, formalization, how much is it used, etc., etc. In programming, usually it's usually often used. In business, I noticed that not so often, really. But like if you consider IT, like really you should expect that like business over time it moves towards IT implementation over to IT projects. So like the more you're in business, the more like this overlap happens, and the more you have these models, the more you have this, let's say, necessity to model in this way how IT guys have developed, because it's really coming from the IT of the 60s, when the programming, etc. Yeah, so if you know like the workflow charts, so more or less you know like the basic principles. Like for instance, in here, you have this process of ordering tickets, and then you have a concrete instance. So instance is a scenario, specific scenario. So for instance, this one, ordering takes 17 minutes, number of tickets is 12, and you received e-tickets before you received e-invoice. And the question is, so for instance, you're interested for some reason to calculate how many emails the customer is going to receive. Maybe for profits, maybe for engagement, maybe for understanding the way the IT is used. But the question is, how many times the email will be received? By modeling it and simulating it, you can actually know the answer. So in here. So you see, like, this is a specification, you don't need to get to details, but basically, AND, XOR, so like AND both ways or only one way. It goes, it receives tickets, it receives invoice, and then it sends the first email, and then it sends second email. So in total we have 2 emails. So like in the way, like it's very simple example. Don't it's, like for this one maybe you don't need this, but like for really complex projects, multi-billion projects, people do this because like like it's multi-billion. And so like that's the power with.
Ilya, do you think that these kind of tools are also useful for small companies, that they have to invest a lot of time and money to do that, or it is more useful for big companies that have very complex processes?
Well, it's an interesting question because in my startup, in one of them which I was working at, the business analyst, he was still modeling, even though it was like a small company, startup, 5 people, like it's not big. But like the way you understand the problem, because like even in small companies, you can have really complex abstractions. And how you're going to manage it? Keep it on your head? No, like you need some way to visualize this. So big companies absolutely always do it. So Germany and like Europe is actually quite good in this respect because you have SAP. So SAP is for enterprise, resource planning, etc. So you have this these big segments in Europe, especially in terms of enterprise model. So yeah, I mean mostly big companies, but like it's I think it's mostly because people don't generally understand what's the purpose of it, because like really like I try to make it as clear as possible, but I see like like it's somehow difficult to understand it at first. It's like in programming, like to program you really need to get an in, you need to persist through the time of not understanding, and once you get to this side you can have all the benefits of it. So that's more or less like the situation that I noticed. And I think it's coming because yeah, I mean like in business field it's not widely studied. Because it's coming from IT, and IT is a different specialty, and you have a gap between the two. So, but now it's changing.
And do you have it? Do you think it is necessary to have this kind of formation in a degree of management? I have already asked this question in the first subgroup, but just to hear you about.
Yeah, I mean, like it's a good question because like the whole context needs to be understood. Like what kind of program, why, etc. Because like now we don't have really good programs teaching this stuff. Because it's really only emerging only like in the past 5 years, and the business education has been like for 100 years. So in my opinion, yes, but I'm also biased because I'm studying the subject, I like the subject, I try to explore the subject, I try to communicate my passion for subject, so maybe I'm biased in this regard. But generally, yeah, I mean like based on these arguments that if you model, like if you can use this powerful tool to model the thing, understand the thing, better control the thing. I mean, like it's universally applicable to finances, to marketing, to football, whatever. So I think yes. To what extent? Maybe not everyone has to be a specialist, but people still learn math and statistics, maybe on the similar scale. Statistics for managers.
Okay.
So modeling for managers, for instance, could be an option.
Because it is much more usual to find these kind of tools in engineering studies. But it is true that in management it is not so obvious, okay? And it helps you to have an overall picture of how a business works. Instead of focusing on a specific department, this kind of modelings give you an overall picture, a more general framework of how a business works, right?
Actually, I have a question for the public. Now, has anyone ever thought about this? Well, you're in your studies, like bachelor's or master's?
Bachelor's, yes.
Bachelor's. So, have you ever noticed, like the similarities between the subjects? So, between accounting and marketing. So, how do you actually? A question to you. So, how do you actually integrate this knowledge? So you have like this accounting principles and marketing principles, and you find in some way they are like somehow similar or overlap. How do you process it?
To be honest, I don't have accounting, but here, for example, I do my Erasmus and I have 4 subjects, and one is, for example, technological innovation, and we did here in business policy a lot with innovation as well. So I could like take the information from that subject and use it here and the other way around.
And how do you find these similarities, or what are your
I see that's the same topic, and we're talking about pretty similar stuff. So yeah, I can adapt the scenario from the other subject to this one.
And is it interesting for you to find, okay, like I remember this subject, is it interesting?
Yeah.
Like, does it trigger, like boom, like you have this.
And you have different point of views, even though it's the same subject. You see how, for example, the professors teach it other ways, but you have like both information, both views on it.
Yeah, it's especially like in strategic management. I think the strategic management is the one that you have studied these subjects.
Silence, please.
Have studied these subjects, and then in strategic management you have this all coming together. And it's actually, like if you were in the childhood, do you remember these dots? And you're supposed to draw through the dots. Like eventually you have this picture, and it's more or less like the effect. It's interesting, like so if you spend, like a third of your life working, at least you can make it interesting in that sense, like here. But by the way, this stuff is also applicable to real life system. It's not directly separate, so like the more you find these things together, the better. Yeah, and so concerning the integration of AT and your subject, so you have studied mergers and acquisitions. Not yet.
Yes, in Unit 4, mergers and acquisitions, we have studied in Unit 4. No, it is not a specific subject, but it is a unit within this subject which is broader. Yes.
Yeah. And so, in mergers and acquisitions, you often have this idea that you look at financials, but then you forget to look at the IT perspective. And what happens is that you don't optimize for both. Do you know that it's easier to build a new hospital than to change its database? Really, like it's easier to build a new hospital than to change its information structure. It's like, like it's information. You couldn't really just like replace it, okay, like here. No, you need to boom, and you think, and you information systems, and based on top, you build the hospital. That's really good. And like with this approach, you can find those inconsistencies. So at least if you consider different processes, if you consider merging them, you need to have certain overlaps. You need a good basis for it to avoid this. Like you have this one hospital, second hospital. You think that okay, like if you combine the hospitals, yes, it's going to be good. But no, you buy them, it's total collapse. It happens all the time in companies. So that's a big, like underwater storm. Yeah, and here you can actually visualize them. So goal modeling, it's for modeling goals, who wants what. It's applicable to business in a way that if you are interested in consulting, if you're interested in, let's say, arranging shareholders, so if you have several owners and they need to sell it somehow, they have different goals. One wants one aspect, another wants another aspect. Not all of them are purely financial, some of them are deeper level. What do? You actually model. It's quite simple language. You have 8 elements, but in the end, you find that, well, it's for learning system, but you find that you have a certain goal of a certain actor, and how this goal relates to his tasks, and these tasks, how they are related to another actor. And in this way, you can find actually the merge. Like you can understand the solution to this. And those problems are actually quite complex. If you know how to solve them, there's a lot of money in this resolution. Like that's market. You know this, you do this, you make a lot of money. Here. Value modeling, similarly. So, how many people know this? Who knows it? So some of you do. So actually, this is the same logic about value, but it's about like one business. It doesn't go as like outside of this business. So value modeling is the same idea, but on a certain activity, on a certain level of abstraction, you can actually model a certain entity and how this entity relates to other entities. And so you can find what is the value exchange between the two. And once you know this, value is obviously money, but not only money, but like resources, knowledge. It extends your, let's say, perspective. So what is value, for instance? And you can actually see it, and then you can find the links between like the missing points. And also like value modeling is essentially about this entity, it does this activity, there's a certain need of this activity, and then for this need, you have another entity, another activity, and the way they relate, often there are mismatches, and often those are the points for improvement. So you can model it as well. So wrapping it all up together, I try to really give you a really brief overview of what is modeling. Because like as Javier said, yes, indeed, like in business, it's an underappreciated skill, so it's in shortage. So that's like really good opportunity for the future if you're really considering it. Take it this from the IT, applying it to business, because few people actually do. Many people do PDFs or texts. You know, like often if you really want to design a system, you have very complex textual descriptions with models. It's scientifically shown that actually it improves the result of the platform. So if you develop a certain product or a business, this is really applicable. So I hope you kind of see more of this value. So it is highly applicable to business, information systems analysis, different modeling languages. If you're interested, you can study them more. There are certain sources for it. So here are the sources. Especially if you're interested, you can attend this OmiLab summer school. They teach more in this aspect. There are much more languages in there. There are different tools. So Javier, well, you can send the
material, the slides.
The slider. Yeah, and you can check the sources. Yes.
Okay.
And also Plato, philosopher, is also related to philosophy. So if someone is interested in, let's say, not only business, not only IT, not only engineering, but if you have some creative side to you, let's say, you can study from philosophy. There's nice, you know, like correlation between your interests and the subject. It's actually, you know, like a lot of people, they discuss not how to, let's say, because like the types of problem you study in conceptual modeling, it's more about these universal things such as like, is it a table, is it not a table, is it a decor, is it whatever, and it's universal. Yes. So thank you. If you have questions.
Thank you very much, Ilya. Any question that you have it? If not, one of the main risks of the modeling, it is not oversimplifying a situation which is quite complex.
Yeah.
What do you think about it?
So if I understand your question correctly, so you ask
oversimplifying the situation because the reality it is too complex. And one of the goals of the modeling it is to simplify a little bit to understand better the certain situation that we face or how the business works. So oversimplifying is good. It has some advantages. What do you think?
That's the art perspective to it, because you don't really know what you don't know. How like did you ask yourself a question like, how do you know what you don't know? You know, like, and like, in order to answer this question, so like, you have a certain reality. Maybe it's like very complex. You try to simplify it. But like, okay, so there's a communication aspect, but like, you also have this idea. So like, the original complexity, is it true complexity? And once you simplify it, like you try to communicate to some stakeholder, etc., etc. But like the simplified, does it actually encompass everything that is above the complexity? So like, how do you make this connection? So it's an art, let's say. It's only by practice. In general, I think it's a tendency to keep it as simple as possible, to the point. And to the point is dependent on the goal of it. On the goal plus your research mechanisms, because in the end you can do all the surveys you want, but you're not really sure if you even ask the right people for the surveys. So that's the question.
And do you know if there is any additional information that students that have studied a degree in management about this, it is possible to study a master on this topic, or it is within other broader studies, like let's say for instance big data, that nowadays it is in fashion and everyone wants to study something related to this. The modeling maybe come together with this kind of studies, or?
Yeah. No, I mean like originally it's coming from computer science, because like in order to program computers, for the computer to know, you really need to have this very concrete, idea, but at the same like quite abstracted. So in a way, that's why you have a table, a class of a table, which is an abstract idea. So you close your eyes, you imagine a table, that's the idea. And then like, once you try to implement this in the computer, you have the same idea of a table, like that's very concrete, and then you transfer it. And since like it's also historical, it has a wide history of development, it's philosophical in nature, but then it goes developed in computer science. Yeah, I mean like, it's not studied at one place, I think, no. Even though currently there's research emerging, but usually it's quite specific to a certain area, so like a business process model or data model. Usually it's like a distance. It's not drawn at the level of, of the broad conception. Yes.
Okay. Any other question that you have it? William? Well, thank you very much, Ilya. And perhaps we can do a break of 5 minutes, okay? And we continue with the class discussing the case of Stellantis in the second part, okay? Your mobile phone here.